One of the most impactful learning moments for me was taking a workshop at MIT in 2014. So I went to this class because it was taught by Dr. Stephen Spear, who I mentioned earlier today in my opening remarks. Since then, he has become a mentor to me, and I cannot overstate the extent to which he has influenced my thinking. So Dr. Spear is famous for many things, but he's probably most famous for writing the most widely downloaded Harvard Business Review paper of all time in 1999 called Decoding the DNA of the Toyota Production System. And this was based in part on his doctoral dissertation that he did at the Harvard Business School. And in support of that work, he worked on the manufacturing plant floor of a tier one Toyota supplier for 6 months. So since then, he's extended his work beyond just high repetition manufacturing work to engine design at Pratt & Whitney, to the building and operating of the safety culture at Alcoa, and how we can make truly safe healthcare systems. More recently, he worked with Admiral John Richardson in supporting a U.S. Navy initiative to create a high-velocity learning dynamic across all aspects of that enterprise. And so for nearly a year and a half, we've been talking nearly 2 to 3 times a week, trying to see if we can codify what we've observed in our careers around how to create these amazing dynamics that truly unleash human creativity and problem-solving potential across so many domains, with the goal of putting this into a book that we're working on to be released in 2023. So this time, we will be presenting on how structure may be the best leading indicator of performance. Steve, I'm so delighted that you were willing to help teach this to us today.
Gene, thank you so much. I consider it one of the great fortunes in my life that we met those some years ago, and that I've had opportunity to be part of the conversation of this community that you've helped nurture and foster for so long.
Thank you so much, Steve. So before you start, let me set the stage by talking about how structure may be one of the best leading indicators of performance. So we believe that there are structures required to enable the dynamics necessary to unleash the distributed and collective human creativity and potential to compete and win. In an age where that's being tumultuously disrupted by scientific and technological innovation, market transformations, and political and societal realignments. We believe that over the last 150 years, we've seen how some organizations have been able to generate and deliver ideas more quickly, better ideas faster, and more reliably. And so the question is, how do these amazing organizations unleash this magical dynamic that are able to help everyone better compete and win? And so again, the thesis is that structure might be the best leading indicator of performance. And so if we look over the last 150 years, we see it as not just DevOps and Agile, it's not just the Toyota production system, but we can see contrasts of how amazing organizations have been able to do great things. For example, send a man safely to the moon and back, as well as be able to create COVID vaccines approved for emergency use, as well as vaccinate them to a population who needs them so badly. In previous presentations, we described how many organizations are trapped in a slower integrated problem-solving style where everyone's trapped in the functional silos, unable to do integrated problem-solving with their peers. In other words, for anyone to do integrated problem-solving, they have to escalate up 8 levels and then down 8 levels. In contrast, in high performers, the majority of communications are not happening up and down the organization. Instead, they're happening across the edges, where the majority of communications are happening within teams or across teams, across sanctioned interfaces. And by doing that, work flows more quickly and more knowledge is being created. And so as a leader, one of the top responsibilities is not only to set system level goals, but to design the organization, assign those roles and responsibilities and relationships between them, and then also assess for performance. And in our thinking, we can even simplify it further, saying the job as a leader is to configure the system and then run it and also assess its performance. So Steve is going to talk about what are those properties required to enable great performance. And he's going to answer questions like, why isn't a hierarchy enough? Why isn't culture enough? And what are the characteristics of how structure can enable great dynamics? So with that, over to Steve.
Gene, I appreciate that very kind introduction that you gave me, and even more so, I appreciate the time we've spent together over the last many, many months discussing how we can manage very, very complex enterprises to tap well into the innate potential of the people in that enterprise to deliver great value to society. And I think one of the things that's been most impactful for me is the realization that we mischaracterize why we form organizations in the first place. And there are a lot of reasons. There's the legal reason of creating LLCs, LTDs, INCs, et cetera. I think perhaps more distracting and misleading is the thought that the reason we're creating organizations is to get economies of scale around physical things, machines, material, and that sort of thing. But really, what's been most impactful and focusing for me in our discussions is the realization that the reason we form organizations in the first place is to collectively and collaboratively solve problems which are much bigger, much harder than we can ever solve and hope to solve as individuals. So when we start thinking about this issue of creating organizations for the explicit purpose of collaborative problem solving, then we start thinking about the ways in which we organize as conducive or corrosive towards meaningful conversation. And so what I'd like to share with our colleagues and friends here is the idea that 4 things we can do. So first is simplify the flow of ideas through an organization to make them less confusing. Second is create standards. And third is to create stabilization mechanisms. And finally is create synchronization amongst those doing the collaborative work, the creative work together. So anyway, let me just sort of quick cartoonish explanation of what I mean by these terms of simplification, standardization, stabilization, and synchronization. So first, why bother simplify? When we think about creating the flow of ideas or the flow of work more generally through an organization, too often we think about minimizing the wait time for the thing. And that kind of leads us in the direction when we're using those industrial metaphors about inadequate